The story starts with Hiroi-san, the most admired girl in the class. Everyone saw her as a kind of inspiration, and one boy had fallen for her the moment he saw her. His feelings grew too strong to ignore, and before he knew it, he had already made a move. Nervous but determined, he slipped a love letter into her locker, his only way to let her know how he felt. But things didn't go as he'd hoped. The very next day he got his answer, and it wasn't from Hiroi-san. Instead, one of her friends called him aside with a serious look on her face. She was holding the same letter he had written. She explained that Hiroi felt really awkward about the whole thing and didn't want to be in that kind of situation. Crushed, the boy sat alone in the quiet classroom. He tried to tell himself that he should have expected this. Hiroi was the class star, loved by everyone, while he was just a backup player on the baseball team, someone no one really noticed. Deep down, he had never believed someone like her would see him. Still, knowing all that didn't make the rejection hurt any less. Just then, he spotted her walking by with her friends outside the classroom. His chest tightened, and only one name filled his thoughts: Hiroi-san. Suddenly, her friend stormed back into the room and slammed her hand down on his desk. She glared at him and asked why he was still holding on after being rejected. She called him pitiful and told him to stop staring at her friend with those sad, watery eyes. The boy, Tsunaki, quietly replied that he understood, gently saying her name, Ichizono. Wanting to avoid more embarrassment, he grabbed his stuff and got ready to leave. He said he wouldn't bother Hiroi-san again. Ichizono didn't say anything at first, just watched as he rushed toward the door. Then, out of nowhere, she called out and told him to wait. She criticized how he handled everything, saying a love letter was way too soft. If he really wanted to impress a girl, he should have shown more courage, acted like a real man. Tsunaki was stunned. He told her that if he had done anything bolder, he probably would have gotten arrested. He defended himself, saying he worked hard on that letter and poured his feelings into it. That's when Ichizono dropped a harsh truth. Hiroi hadn't even read the letter. She told him he was rejected without a second thought. And maybe, she added, if he could accept that, it would be easier for him to let go. Ichizono then began to point out everything she thought was wrong with him. She criticized his hair, his clothes, and even made fun of how short he was. She complained about how he always repeated the same stories, his bad grades, and how messy his desk was. She didn't stop there. She mentioned how loud he talked with his friends, how awkward he was around girls, and even the way he held his chopsticks. Her list of complaints felt never-ending, and Tsunaki sat there in shock, unable to say a word under her barrage of insults. Then, all of a sudden, Ichizono paused. It was like she forgot what they were even talking about. She looked a little unsure, then gave a light smile and said it made perfect sense that he got rejected, so there was no need for him to feel bad. That was the last straw for Tsunaki. He finally snapped and let out a cry full of pain and frustration. He turned to her, clearly upset, and asked why she had to be so cruel. Ichizono seemed caught off guard by his outburst. She said she was just trying to cheer him up in her own way. She even added his temper to the list of his flaws and admitted she only stepped in because she felt it was her responsibility. Tsunaki took a deep breath, trying to calm down. In the end, he realized there was nothing he could do about Hiroi never reading the letter. With tears welling up in his eyes, Tsunaki finally spoke from the heart. What really hurt him wasn't just being rejected, it was that Hiroi didn't do it herself. Instead, she sent a friend, and that felt even worse. If she was going to say no, he wished she had the courage to tell him face to face. Ichizono, clearly irritated by seeing him cry again, suddenly seemed to get an idea. She told him that if he was so upset, then he should do something about it, prove himself. She pointed straight at him and said he needed to make Hiroi regret turning him down. He should become someone impressive enough to make her wish she'd said yes. But Tsunaki looked unsure, like he had no clue how to even begin. That's when Ichizono gave him a plan. Since he was on the baseball team and Hiroi liked sporty guys, he should start showing off his best side during games. Tsunaki hesitated, saying he wasn't even a starter and that it felt kind of wrong to put in all that effort just to get back at someone. But Ichizono wasn't having it. She cut him off, shouting that if he kept making excuses, he'd never change. She said he'd stay a nobody if he didn't start believing in himself. Then her tone shifted. She admitted that Hiroi hadn't treated him fairly. But just as she turned to leave, she hit him with one last harsh truth. Someone as spineless as him wasn't even worth rejecting the right way. Her harsh words hit Tsunaki like a punch to the gut. That was the moment he truly saw how pitiful he had been acting. Something inside him snapped and changed. From that day forward, he threw himself into baseball practice with a fire that shocked everyone. No one could believe it. The same guy who used to mess up all the time was now pushing himself harder than anyone else on the team. His teammates were confused but impressed. One of them even joked that it looked like Tsunaki was out for revenge, like he had something, or someone, he needed to prove wrong. He trained so fiercely that he ended up breaking all the practice balls. The coach finally took notice of the quiet kid who never gave up, even when it rained. Tsunaki kept running, pushing his limits, never slowing down. His teammates started to respect him, even if they couldn't tell how long he'd last at that crazy pace. But all that hard work began to pay off. He started playing really well in games, surprising everyone. His teammates began treating him like a key part of the team. They even joked that he must have finally listened to their advice. What they didn't know was that someone had been secretly watching him from the sidelines the whole time. Hidden behind the fence, Ichizono was quietly keeping an eye on his progress. Then the big day arrived, the most important game of the season. Tsunaki stepped up to bat, and with everything he had, he landed a perfect hit. The crowd went wild. In the stands, Hiroi cheered, clearly amazed by what he'd just done. Right next to her, Ichizono stared in disbelief, shocked at how much he had changed. That powerful swing didn't just impress the audience, it won the game. His teammates swarmed him, lifting him up like a hero and praising him for his clutch performance. The team captain was already fired up, talking about how they could finally get payback for last year's loss. Tsunaki smiled and thanked them, but also apologized, saying he still had more work to do. Deep down, though, he knew his goal wasn't just to beat the other team. The person he really wanted to prove something to wasn't wearing a jersey. Later on, after the game had ended, Ichizono approached him. She smiled and handed him a letter, saying it was from Hiroi. Tsunaki stood there stunned, not knowing what to say. Ichizono explained it wasn't a love letter, it was more like a fan letter, praising his performance and congratulating him. With a proud grin, she asked if he felt better now. After all, he'd reached his goal and made a statement in the best way possible. She even teased him, saying that now he could have his pick of girls, and if he wanted, she'd be happy to reject Hiroi for him herself. Tsunaki looked nervous and quickly tried to explain that he hadn't trained so hard just to get attention. But Ichizono just laughed at him, clearly not buying it. She said she had known the truth the whole time. He'd pushed himself to get back at Hiroi, and nothing he said could change her mind. Seeing his embarrassed face, she started to walk away. Before leaving, she told him to give it a few days before making any big choices. He deserved that time to figure things out. Then, with one last glance over her shoulder, she gave him a sharp reminder. If he wanted to act like a real man, he should never give his answer in a letter again. But this time, he didn't need words. Following her advice, Tsunaki did something bold. Without hesitation, he stepped forward and hugged Ichizono from behind. She froze in shock, eyes wide, completely caught off guard. Blushing, she called him an idiot and tried to say he had the wrong girl. But Tsunaki didn't let go. For once, he was the one in control, calm and confident. He told her he wouldn't release her until she admitted one thing, that he was actually cool now. Ichizono gave him a playful smirk and replied with a challenge of her own. With their faces just inches apart, she leaned in and kissed him on the cheek. Then she whispered, why? If he didn't let go, she couldn't turn around and kiss him properly. Somewhere nearby, someone else's heart quietly broke. But Ichizono didn't care. She looked at Tsunaki with a grin and said one last teasing line, a real man should never let a girl kiss him first.